They called it Project Necrosis. A name that was never printed on any official document, yet whispered through every corridor where fear was currency. It was the Cold War's most forbidden experiment, the pursuit of death as a controllable state. In a time when nations raced not only for power, but for domination of the human soul, science crossed into the realm of resurrection.
Did you do it?
The Cold War was never just about weapons or borders. It was about obedience, about bending the mind before breaking the body. The US and the Soviet Union stood like twin titans, staring into each other's reflections. And in that mirrored fear, they both asked the same question. Can death be tamed? Can life be reprogrammed? It began quietly, with doctors, soldiers, and scientists who believed they were serving progress. In Fort Detrick, Maryland, the hum of refrigeration units drowned out the screams of test animals. In Sverdlovsk, deep beneath Soviet soil, steel doors sealed experiments that were never meant to be seen again. They called it neural endurance, post-mortem cognition, biological persistence. Elegant words for something unspeakable. Every government denied it, every nation pretended innocence. Yet, as declassified fragments would later reveal, both sides were obsessed with a singular vision: to control the human will itself. At the heart of it all lay the myth of reanimation. Not the fantasy of corpses clawing their way from graves, but something subtler, colder. A living body without autonomy. A human stripped of fear, doubt, and choice. A soldier who would never question orders. A citizen who would never rebel. A generation that would march without knowing why. In America, the project's roots intertwined with MKUltra, the CIA's attempt to hack the human psyche. From LSD to electroshock, from hypnosis to sensory deprivation, they mapped the edges of the mind and found the abyss waiting underneath. When they couldn't control thoughts, they turned to chemistry. When chemistry failed, they turned to biology. Viruses that affected cognition. Neurotoxins that could erase memory while keeping reflex intact. They didn't need the undead. They just needed the unthinking. Meanwhile, across the Iron Curtain, Soviet laboratories took the opposite path. Instead of drugs to break the will, they sought viruses to rebuild it. Their goal was obedience, not by removing consciousness, but by reshaping it. One directive, one command. Like a hive, ruled by a silent signal. And somewhere between those two philosophies, between mind control and biological obedience, the myth of Project Necrosis was born. A secret so buried in disinformation that even those inside it doubted it was real. A rumor made of truth. The experiments escalated. Rats injected with modified rabies viruses showed strange behaviors, coordination without awareness. Dogs revived minutes after death, twitching and breathing with empty eyes. Human cadavers used for neural stimulation, electrodes forcing movement into dead tissue. A grotesque ballet between life and decay. Scientists described the phenomenon clinically as autonomic reanimation. Witnesses simply called it the nightmare. In the 1960s, intelligence agencies began hearing reports of a parallel project, a Soviet program codenamed Chorna Otriad, the Black Detachment. Rumors said they were developing a pathogen designed to trigger aggression while suppressing empathy. A perfect weapon for psychological warfare. But no one ever saw the results. Only sealed towns, quarantined under the excuse of industrial accidents. And workers who vanished after exposure. By 1979, reality caught up with rumor. Sverdlovsk, an anthrax outbreak that officials blamed on contaminated meat. But the symptoms described by locals told another story. Uncoordinated walking, vacant stares, convulsions that looked like mechanical spasms. Bodies that refused to stay still. The KGB silenced witnesses, destroyed evidence, and rewrote every record. But whispers survived. Western analysts renamed it the Necrosis incident. A legend was born from the ashes of secrecy. Soon after, Western media began to change. Zombie films multiplied, The Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. Was it coincidence, or confession? Through cinema, Societies began to express their subconscious terror. Not of monsters, but of conformity. The zombie wasn't a corpse, it was a reflection. A mirror held to the modern citizen, alive, but disconnected. Breathing, but directionless. A being who obeys every broadcast, every headline, every lie. The Cold War was fought not just in the skies or the deserts, but in the human mind. Every ideology promised truth, but demanded silence. Every government claimed freedom, but feared awareness. And in that quiet obedience, the true virus spread. Propaganda. It needed no syringe, no injection, no lab. It was transmitted through repetition, through fear, through belonging. Whole nations became infected, their people moving in unison, convinced they were alive, when in truth, they were only reacting. Marching, voting, consuming, scrolling, without ever questioning why. As the decades passed, Project Necrosis slipped from classified files into cultural mythology. Some claimed it was merely metaphor, a psychological allegory born from paranoia. Others believed it never ended. That deep underground, somewhere beyond jurisdiction. Scientists continued the work, exploring how to preserve the body while suppressing the self. Some whispered that the next phase was not biological at all, but digital. Today, the battlefield has shifted again. Our nervous systems no longer respond to syringes, but to notifications. Our reflexes are not controlled by chemicals, but by algorithms. Every scroll, every reaction, every outrage measured and monetized. The new virus wears the mask of convenience. It doesn't infect your body. It rewires your attention. And attention is the modern bloodstream of control. Look around. People move through cities, eyes fixed on glowing screens. Their minds echoing headlines not written by themselves. We are all test subjects now. Our data is the new specimen. Our memories are the new petri dish. And somewhere, in the vast machinery of networks and feeds, Project Necrosis has evolved into something subtler, quieter, and far more effective. Once, governments tried to raise the dead. Now, they only need to keep the living numb. Once, they experimented with corpses. Now, they experiment with consciousness. And the result is the same. A population that moves, but no longer thinks. Maybe the zombie apocalypse was never meant to begin with infection. Maybe it began the first time a man stopped questioning his orders. The first time a woman stopped believing her own memory. The first time humanity chose silence over truth. Every empire that has fallen began with obedience. And every civilization that vanished did so not because it was defeated, but because it forgot how to resist. The scientists of Project Necrosis sought to animate the dead. But in doing so, they proved something terrifying. The line between life and death is not measured by heartbeat, but by awareness. So perhaps, after all these decades, Project Necrosis was never about reviving bodies. It was about testing humanity itself. To see how much could be taken, before no one noticed what was lost. To learn whether the human race could survive, without its soul. And as the world grows quieter, as we surrender our thoughts to machines, our fears to propaganda, our choices to automation, the experiment continues. Invisible. Flawless. Complete. Maybe the end of humanity won't come from the dead rising, but from the living falling silent.